the weekend. Jordan Schultz broke it. Congrats to him. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are locked into long-term deals to stay in Cincinnati. Listen, I know the salary cap's going up, but Colin, this is getting a little silly. Jamar Chase, 4 years, $161 million.
It's a lot, but also there's a story out. They're talking now to Hendrickson.
Yeah, we'll see.
So if they pay all four of their best players, I got no complaints.
$112 million guaranteed for Chase, making him and this is starting to get dumb, okay? Highest paid non-quarterback in the league. This is some ego status game that players are playing because it was Max Crosby had to get it, then Myles Garrett, now Jamar Chase. Micah Parsons is waiting. It's just so stupid.
Yeah, but you know what I'm seeing on this list?
A bunch of
Jamar
overpaid
Chase,
guys?
Myles Garrett, Crosby, Jefferson, Bosa, CeeDee Lamb. You know what I'm seeing on this list?
Non-playoff teams?
No. Guys who are great and wildly productive. This list doesn't bother me at all. Justin Jefferson, Myles, Jamar, Max, Nick, and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. Just humor me. How many guys on that list, the top 6 that you see on the screen, how many were in the playoffs last year? Just humor me.
Time out.
How many?
You have money. You got to spend it on somebody. I, as a general manager, would have re-signed every one of these players for that money.
I don't disagree with you.
Well, then what are you complaining about?
Well, it's not a complaint. I think it's a discussion. It's the way you build a team is interesting. The salary cap's going up, right? So that means the star players get more. But as we're seeing, you can't pay the star guys at the top and build a good roster.
Well, I'll push back.
Roster.
All of those guys that you look at, we can put that list up again. They were all drafted by that team. They're not buying guys in free agency. These were guys the teams drafted, most in the first round. The players delivered on the promise.
100%. And
the team said, we're going to reward you. I have no problem drafting a guy. He becomes arguably the best player in his position. I'll pay those guys 100 out of 100 times.
I agree. Now, are you applying the same to the NBA when it comes to Jaylen Brown making $70 million?
All right. Well, we're not going to start talking about the NBA because this is night and day difference between the NFL and the NBA. I think this is actually such a more complicated discussion than anyone ever wants to really give it credit for. And it's something that I get why we all talk about it and discuss it and talk about the money. But I've said this a lot now over the months that, like, to pretend like we know exactly how much these players should actually make in the grand scheme of building a team and salary cap and understanding what the future looks like and the guarantees. Like I said, like the GMs themselves hire money guys that are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to figure all this stuff out. So if you think you or I are just going to casually be able to be like, yeah, Jamar Chase, I would have signed him for $34.5 million, but not 40. It's like, okay. And I get, we all want to have our opinions, and you know, that's the fun of sports and sports talk. So I do get it, but I also encourage people to kind of have like the awareness to just be like, it's, you know, this stuff is hard, and that's why, like, J-Max coming in hot, being like, oh, you can't pay all these guys, blah 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 blah, and it's like, all right, well, the Cleveland Browns didn't make the playoffs not because they paid Myles Garrett $40 million, okay? Jamar Chase wasn't getting paid $40 million, and the Bengals didn't make the playoffs. They weren't paying T. Higgins or Jamar, and they weren't able to do anything. So, like, you can't say it's the money. Nick Bosa, you know, the 49ers were literally in 2 Super Bowls since 2019. But if we just want to say recently with Bosa, you know, literally not last year, but the year before. Okay. And it went to overtime, and, you know, they were essentially a play away from winning that Super Bowl. So, like, what are we talking about here? The Cowboys. And again, I've always made fun of the Cowboys to say that those 12-win seasons are, you know, a little bit misleading, but still, they're obviously not a bunch of scrubs, et cetera, et cetera. They're not like the worst team. So I just think it's too, you know, you can't just say that. And again, Max Crosby hasn't had a quarterback, and it's not because they paid him, you know, $35 million. Like, they haven't had a coach or a quarterback. That has nothing to do with the money. Nothing to do with the money. So I just think it's kind of absurd here. I think, right, obviously you want to try to pay all these players less money, but you obviously have to pay someone money. And trying to figure out when and how to do that. Like, everyone tries to always figure out, oh, don't pay wide receivers. And that's what's interesting, because Colin's like defending the Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase here, when before he was kind of like, oh, don't pay wide receivers money. You know, don't pay them all this money. You can draft them. You kept saying, look at the Chiefs. They moved on from Tyreek Hill. And it was like, yeah, and their offense has struggled since then, and and yet he defends it. And again, it also depends on who you are as a team. Who is your quarterback? Who is your GM? Who is your coach? Right? Like, if you have an Andy Reid, then sure, you can move on from a Tyreek Hill because you're confident that the coach who you pay a ton of money will be able to make other wide receivers work successful, along with your all-time great quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. If you're Justin Jefferson, if you're the Vikings, you might not have that same level of confidence, or the Bengals or, whoever. So sometimes when you have the great talent in your building, you're like, yeah, you know what? Like, I believe, even if you're an owner, GM, whoever, even if you're like confident that you'll be able to find other talent, you can still recognize, man, I had a grand slam with this pick. To think that I'm just going to be able to find another Jamar Chase, another Justin Jefferson, another Bosa, Garrett, et cetera, like, no. So, like, I have the awareness to know we got this guy in this building. I'm not going to just be able to be like, oh, we could draft another one. It's not that easy. Everyone always says, oh, you could just draft another one. So go do it then. You go draft another all-time great special player. Go do it. You guys are acting like it's so easy. Go do it. Even the great teams that do it, it's still hard. We talk about, again, the Chiefs, the Eagles, et cetera. Like, they always find talent. Doesn't mean that it's easy. Tom Brady, he just wins and wins Super Bowls. Yeah, and it was brutally difficult. Tom Brady himself was, when he went on like a dry, stretch of time where he was like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. So that's also the benefit of actually having an experienced GM. Because when you have some young GMs, they're kind of like these athletes where they're just kind of like, oh man, dude, all I do is win, like, are you kidding me? I find everything in the draft, like all the moves that I make, like I'm never going to fail. And again, like Tom Brady even had that mentality himself. In the beginning of his career, he thought like winning Super Bowls was easy. And then it wasn't until he went through the long period of time when he wasn't winning, he was like, oh, never mind. Like this is a lot harder than I thought it was. And you need that realization. So GMs need to learn and grow. They need to make mistakes. Owners even need to learn and grow, make mistakes, figure out what works, what doesn't work. But there is no mass. We're always trying to be like, oh, well, you want a quarterback on a rookie deal, and then you do this and you do that. And it's like, yeah, those things are all well and good. And of course, when you have a great player and that you're not paying, you want to maximize that. But it's not like just this end all be all of like, okay, you never want to pay these players money, especially when you're the leaders and the foundation of your team. And if you don't pay some of these guys this money, then other players are kind of like, well, I'm trying to think of like finishing out my contract and get the heck out of this city because I still want to get paid. Like it's a tough aspect of the NFL. I'm happy it exists. Some fans really struggle with this kind of back and forth in terms of how much to pay players and how they should get all their money in this or that. To me, it's such an important aspect of this game to have these conversations, to have teams go back up against the wall and being forced to pay these players a lot of money. And sometimes they have to, move on from a player because it's part of the business side of the NFL that continues to make it exciting, competitive, interesting, why some teams have to move on from a Jamar Chase, and now another team that's really not that good can get a Jamar Chase, and now they have him, and now they can build from there. Like it adds such a depth and competitiveness to the NFL that other leagues just quite frankly don't have. It's part of the reason, a big part of the reason why the NFL is king. Jamar Chase can't just say, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go to the highest bidder, and everyone's just going to try to keep raising the money higher and higher and higher like they do in Major League Baseball. They don't do that. And so, I'm grateful that teams are forced to make really hard decisions like this. But you can't just look at this and say, how many of these teams made it to the Super Bowl? Well, A.J. Brown got paid a ton of money. Devontae got paid a ton of money. Jalen Hurts got paid a ton of money. That's the quarterback and 2 wide receivers. Saquon Barkley, he was overpaid for a running back. And they won because it's a collection of things. They also needed to draft really young talent. They needed to get someone cheap like a Zach Bond, a Becton, still have some decent, aging deals like a Lane Johnson, like a Mailata. It's all a balance. It's not all or nothing. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about all these players getting paid a boatload of money. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.